Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently January 4th, 2010, and this is going to be Day 9 Daily number 41. Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be doing Flash again, but he loses this time. So, unfortunately, for any of you who are tuning in to get a spoiler-free look at the games, it's not going to happen. You know, I like Flash. I think Flash is good. He obviously has just hit the all-time highest ELO rating ever of 2,400. Of course, this is just, Team Liquid's own doing this ELO ranking, but, he's obviously really good. But this is a game where he actually loses, so I really sort of like to see that, and he's clearly taking StarCraft to a super new level. But what I love about this game is it's a really short game, pretty straightforward, but it's not something huge and dramatic, because I can conceive of some person barely holding off Flash's onslaught of aggression, all his really nice timing and everything, and then getting into the late game and winning after dramatic game. But this game is fairly one-sided, and I like that, because one-sided games are often times the most educational, because you get to see really how to exploit the shit out of people. I just briefly wanted to say that before we end up starting, the music that was playing just before the cast began is music by a friend of mine, Vincent Diamante. He did the music for the PSN game Flower, if any of you have heard it, and it just won Best Music from either G4 TV or Spike TV. And it beat out like Halo 3 and Assassin's Creed 2, these like bazillion-dollar production value games. And Vincent Diamante just snapped their necks with his music because he has the Diamante touch, is what we call it. And also, it is currently Monday. I almost said Tuesday because I'm on winter break. I don't even have to keep track of the days now. But on Sunday, I'm going to be doing casting for the Team Liquid Star League. Oh, you should all tune into that. Team Liquid Star League, I'll be doing it with Chill. So instead of me just doing a constant, monologue, Jill will be there. We'll get to a little chit-chatteroo. So without further ado, let's just go on and bounce on over to the game. Oh, that's a touch loud. That's a touch unbelievably loud. I'm pretty happy because, oh my god, like, Procaster has been so good to me. Oh, it's been good. Oh, you know what? I just want to say that I just got back from visiting Kansas City, which is my hometown, for 2 weeks. That's why I didn't do the Day 9 Daily for that period of time. And, about people in the South, they don't use, like, adverbs or long descriptors. They just keep repeating the same word over and over again. Like, if I had a great meal, I'd be like, wow, this meal was fantastic. It was absolutely delicious meal. Someone from the South, they'd just be like, oh, it was good. This was good. Oh, God, I talked to an accountant while I was there, and I was like, we were talking to this guy, Craig, and he just goes, oh, he is funny. Oh, he's funny. And I'm like, yeah, he's absolutely hilarious, isn't he? And you're invading my personal space, so back off. So, that's a little bit of my little Midwest experience sort of coming out right there. And one thing that did bug me about this game is they spent so much time at the start of the game just, showing the camera of people just holding up signs and stuff. Now, we're going to see Zero do. I'm going to preemptively say what is going to happen, because it's very clever, Zero's build. This really shows him taking sort of, classical, modern techniques, just what people have been doing for a while, and putting a new twist on it to create something very, very clever. So what he's going to do is he's going to do a very, very fast 2-hatch Mutalisk build. We're actually going to see his pool coming down in just a minute. I'm going to wait for the pool to go down just to point out how unbelievably fast this is. Well, I take a drink of my bean tea. There we go, a drink of my green tea. It's fantastic. I'm going to see him. And this is really common to get the pool really early, something like pool on 12 before the hatch, and then gas on 11, or sometimes gas 12, pool 11, because it allows you to get the layer so fast. Now, typically when you do that style of 2-hatch Mutalisk, you're obviously behind on drones, because the hatchery that's usually planted very early here at the expansion is gone. So you don't get the opportunity to get all those extra larva's worth of drones built. So you end up kind of economically behind. But instead, as we're going to see, there it goes. There it is. See, look at this. Very, very, very early. Getting them both right on 12. Yeah, so ordinarily you'd see a whole bunch of drones, but we don't see that when we see this sort of ultra-fast 2-hatch Mutalisk. Ultra-fast Mutalisks. And when players normally do this, they just get the second guys with their expansion, and they try to Mutalisk their opponent to death. It's like a delayed all-in, a win around the 8-minute, 30-second mark, or sometimes the 8-minute mark if you're really good at harassing. Oh, by the way, I do want to briefly say that for any of you who ever rewatch your replays for analysis, keep note of when the times happen on things, because this allows you to compare the game that you played with other games that you played. So, for instance, like let's say you do a Mutalisk harass against what's a better example? Let's say you open up with Lurkers, and your opponent thought you were going for Mutalisk, so he built a whole bunch of turrets. And then let's say you played another game where you did go Mutalisks and you managed to kill your opponent long before he had his turrets up. You can look at game 1 where he had those Lurkers, or where you went Lurkers and he built the turrets first, and you can be like, wow, he built his turrets at 5 minutes and 45 seconds in this game. And then you can look at your Mutalisk game and you can say, man, my Mutalisk came out at 6 minutes and 15 seconds. And even though it killed this guy because he didn't have any turrets, I know from seeing the other game that it is possible to have turrets up by the 5 minute 45 second mark. So I'm starting to get a little concerned about it. The most common way to use this timing is like in Zerg vs. Terran. Oh, the Terran mid-game push normally comes out at about 9 minutes and 30 seconds. It's a very normal time for it to come out in very normal circumstances. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later, but that's a good benchmark time for things. So that's why I always tend to mention times every now and again. So for instance, if you go just usual sort of 2-hatch Mutalisk, you can get the Mutas out at about 5 minutes and 30 seconds. It's pretty typical, but we're going to be blown away at how Zero gets them so fast. Now, I've been talking a lot about fast Mutalisks and all-inning and stuff, but here's the little twist that we see Zero do that's so brilliant. He gets enough gas to get his first 8, 9, maybe 10 Mutalisks out. I didn't count exactly. But he gets his first batch of Mutalisks up, and then he takes almost all his guys off gas and just starts mining minerals and goes straight into an economic game where he takes this expo here and this expo here. And that allows him to begin the harassment before his opponent has stim, let alone before his opponent has range, right? Normally we 2-hatch Mutalisk because we abuse the fact that the Terran normally doesn't have range, but here you can even get there before stim. And Zero's going to be doing a lot of damage with this 2-hatch Mutalisk, and because they're early, he worries less about early push-outs with Medic Marine, and because he pulls his drones out, he gets this economic follow-through. Incredible, incredible decision-making by Zero. Really love seeing that. We're going to see Flash do everything that he normally does. This is something to note. For any of you who ever have trouble with these SCVs, have one Zergling, right-clicked on it, following it, and then control the other 3. You always have one follow, and the other 3 sort of go around. See, there's the one following on the left. And obviously this is excellent placement. Has really small holes. Flash is just going to load one guy into there and clog up that hole with his Marines. Yeah, see, one link following, these 3 links kind of running around. Look, 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and he's already getting his Spire down. That is a fast friggin' Spire, man. Holy cow. Now, if I'm Flash, I'm looking at this thinking, yeah, great. I'm going to have to deal with an ultra-fast, 2-hatch Mutalisk. I'm going to hold it off, and then I'm going to go win. That's pretty much how Flash does it. We see the Spire coming out. I'm waiting for them to go back to the Terran's base, because they have things to say. There we go. See, Flash really likes getting these 2 barracks before he gets the Academy and before he gets the Refinery. He gets them at about the same time, the Refinery and the Academy, but he gets them right after he starts building that second barracks, and as a result, he has a pretty decent number of Medic Marine, not too many, but enough to do an early push, and that's what we've really seen him do a ton. You should rewatch the game I actually did yesterday, which is going to be Flash versus Calm on that map. See, there's the Academy coming out right now. It was Flash versus Calm on Fighting Spirit, and Flash moved out early with that little group and did a little bit of damage. But here, he's not going to be able to quite get it out so fast because Zero does have the ultra-fast Spire. Now, notice there are guys in gas right now. This is to ensure that he gets enough gas to do the big harassment coming up. And here comes the Spire. Look, it's finishing before the 5-minute marks. Jesus, those are some super fast Mutalisks. Incredibly, incredibly fast Mutalisks. And see, the engineering bay has excellent timing. I mean, he is going to be able to get some turrets out, but that Academy, you see that SCV that's... Oopsie daisies. I'm going to rewind it just a little nib there. See this guy? He's returning from finishing the Academy. So see, the Academy is only just now finished, so he can only just now begin researching STEM. And the Mutalisks are already building. That's what makes this sort of early attack, these ultra-fast 2-hatch Mutalisks so effective and so potent. So, of course, when I was watching this, I was like, well, Flash is going to obviously have a little bit of trouble. All right, look, we haven't even hit 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The Mutalisks are already out. Oh, the focus, the killer in his eye. So, I mean, that sort of 20, 30-second advantage is tremendous. So I saw this guy on the minimap, and I was kind of like, that's weird. How can he have enough money to do that? And the answer is that he's pulled guys off gas. And look at how fast this harass is coming. This is incredible. And look at these poor little Marines. This is exactly what you want the Marines to do, to be wandering back here in a limbo line. These front three are just asking to be killed. They're begging to be murdered. Look, there's the first guy getting his wish, and the second, and the third. And you know what? Even if your Mutalisk harass is really bad, it is easy as hell to kill Mutalisks, or to kill Marines without stim. I mean, look at this. This is not even difficult at all. You just hit hold position a couple times, and suddenly you're taking out the best player in the world. Ho! So this time I was kind of like, wow, look at the middle of the map. No Mutalisks have actually passed over to join this group. This is just the first little pack. Actually, I'm going to rewind a little bit here. Just to show you. Okay, so there's a Mutalisk there. We're currently at the 5-minute, 45-second mark. So there should be more Mutalisks coming in any other game. But not Zero going for his economic follow-through. Look, still killing stuff off. Look, like a full 20, 30 seconds almost. Yeah, we've already passed 30 seconds. We haven't seen any more Mutalisks cross. Yeah, and I saw this and I was like, he took guys out of gas. Oh my god, that's so brilliant. Because now he has, look at all these drones. He was making drones back here. So, again, just to reiterate this point, because this build that Zero's doing is so clever. He's getting the Mutalisks early and abusing their earliness to do the damage. He's not using a lot of Mutalisks to do the damage. That's the way that 2-hatch Mutalisk normally ends up working, is you get in there, and then once you get 9, 10 Mutalisks, you start really putting the pressure on, and then once you get 15, 16, 17 Mutalisks, you can really start breaking into the Terran's front. But Zero's just getting 8 or 9, doing some good harassment. We already saw him kill a whole bunch of Marines, and in the meantime, he's just been building up an economy. Ooh, super sexy. Again, taking an old-school build, or excuse me, I should say a very modern build, and doing a super new twist on it. Well, I guess if you consider like 2007 old school, then yeah, 2-hatch Mutalisk is super old school. And now Flash has to build way more turrets than he'd ideally like to build. And we already have the 4th hatch coming down here now for Zero. Very common strategy on this map is to open up, in some fashion, but to take this expansion and then to immediately take the mineral natural and rely on a big army to defend you from that mid-game push, as opposed to using defilers to defend you from that mid-game push. A lot of players used to get this 3rd gas, go straight for the defilers to stay alive, but not on this map. People value this little extra set of minerals that they can squeeze on in. So even more turrets going down for Flash. Sort of the rough situation you kind of end up in. Look how many drones he was able to build. My god, look, still making drones. Incredible job. And, Zero's probably stockpiled a decent amount of gas. Not a ton, because he took guys off gas, but, he might have 200 or 300 left over that will allow him to get a lurker upgrade very quickly here. We see the bottom right expansion is finished. And look at this. So Flash normally moves out with something a little bit smaller, like 2-3 Marines smaller. He would move out with that at about the 5-minute, 30-second mark, about the 5-minute mark or so. He would start moving out with this Medic Marine group. But he hasn't been able to do that because these Mutalisks got there so early. I'm loving what Zero's doing. I was watching this game, and I actually was confused when I watched this game. I thought that Flash 2-0'd Zero in this series, so I thought Flash won this game. And I'm just watching this going, Jesus, Flash really is the best player in the world if he can just live through this, no problem. But of course I was wrong. We'll proceed to see a huge rape. Yeah, so there's the 5th hatch coming down. We do see the Hydralisk Den finally there, doing some, progression of tech. But these Mutalisks are not over-committing, So let me briefly discuss Mutalisks. In the 2-hatch Muta style, where you're being really aggressive and constantly making as many Mutalisks as you can, you tend to get in there and kill off turrets and get in good positions to take, little Marines who are too far away from the medics, take them out, kill SCVs, kill the SCV making the factory, just delay him as much as possible, wound him as much as possible and potentially kill him right there. Now, if you're 3-hatching with your Mutalisks, generally these Mutalisks just sort of ease their way around the base and try to kill off anything that's there, but they don't force themselves to do anything the way you force things to happen when you go 2-hatch Mutalisk, the way that Jaedong really forces things to happen when he goes 2-hatch Mutalisk. And what we're seeing here is Zero opened up with this ultra-fast 2-hatch, and he's treating his Mutalisks like they're 3-hatch style Mutalisks. He's poking around, he's using them instead to delay pushes, to do a little bit of damage at first, but he's not overcommitting. He wants to keep those Mutalisks alive. And this is what's allowing him to take this big right side of the map. Go, Zero! What a superhero. Now the factory's coming out. That's the normal timing for the factory, given the, horrendous situation that Flash was in early on. Oh, and we do have the +1 armor upgrade. A reasonable question is, why the armor and not the attack? Because with the attack, the Mutalisks kill the Marines in 4 hits instead of 5. But honestly, you're really aiming to keep your Mutalisks alive, and generally the Marine is stimmed, so you're still getting away with about 4 hits if you can time your swipes properly. You would like to get the +1 attack upgrade if you're doing the super ultra aggressive 2-hatch Mutalisk, because then you can kill turrets in 2 swipes. And by the way, I know you can kill it in 2 swipes without the upgrade. You kill it, you do 2 swipes, and then you wait like 4 seconds, and then it burns itself down. But it really is so much, just that few extra second difference is pretty significant. So, again, if you're being really aggressive, getting that +1 attack upgrade is huge. But when you're trying to be defensive with your Mutalisks here, and you're trying to keep your expansions alive, getting that +1 carapace is very valuable. And the way that Zero is going to defend all these bases is he's going to rely on having a bunch of Mutalisks. He's not going to be trying to do something like get 7 Lurkers. It's much more valuable to get 5 Mutalisks and 2 Lurkers instead of 7 Lurkers when you're trying to defend this sort of push. Because the 2 Lurkers will sort of push it over the edge and allow you to win. But the Mutalisks are really the things that are doing the damage. And if you try to get a whole bunch of Lurkers, then your Mutalisks will evaporate really quickly to the Medic Marine fire. And they'll have a bunch of Lurkers that you weren't able to position properly. Here's a Lurker timing from Zero. Very, very good Lurker timing. Really thin. And look at how late this is, okay? So these Mutalisks popped out about 5 minutes and 15 seconds. And we're almost at the 10-minute mark, and only now are we really starting to see those Lurkers come out. In that entire 5-minute period, Zero was doing damage with these Mutalisks and expanding and making tons of drones. And look how he was able to get away with that. 5 minutes is a long time in StarCraft. I mean, seriously, that is such a long amount of time. Look at this, still making Mutalisks. Really key to continue to replenish Mutalisk numbers, and you just need a few Lurkers to really sort of wrap things up. But the Mutalisks were what really allowed you to do the damage. And, oops, sorry, I have this pointer accidentally resting there. What's really neat about the way that Zero is playing this game out, and by the way, Flash is doing everything very normally. You can add on a bunch more barracks once you lose your army because you don't have to build supply depots. That's a good opportunity to just throw a few extra barracks down there. What we're seeing is a good strategy, which is ultra-fast Mutalisks into an economic play. A very good strategy, and what we're going to see is a tactic incorporated. Now, I need to make the distinction between tactics and strategy, where strategy is your overarching big long-term plan, and a tactic is this sort of thing. And it's important not to confuse the two. And I mean, a lot of you are going, well, yeah, you've made the obvious distinction between them, but the problem is that a lot of people will see this right here. They'll see these Lurkers right here killing off these turrets, the Mutalisks they're defending, and they'll think, man, I should really do that. And then they gear their entire game plan towards doing that. And then what happens is, they'll win 2 or 3 games and be like, haha, I get this matchup. And then they'll be against a player who's able to hold it off effectively, and suddenly that sort of player will be like, oh crap, I don't know what to do now. This sucks, And that's why you should always think of your strategy first and say, and I would like to try to do this if I can, as an added bonus for my good strategy, but I'm not going to necessarily force it to happen. And look how patient Zero is, right? He's not running in, he's not sprinting there to kill off the turret. Really good. And again, notice that this is the sort of formation you have to take. You have to do this limbo line because these Lurkers are creating this death zone right here in this area. So then the Mutalisks can pick things off even more easily from this angle. So only now are we getting a tank out. So see, notice that we're at about the 10-minute and 40-second mark. Undisturbed Terran can move out about the 9-minute and 30-second mark. If they've been messed with Mutalisks, they can generally move out at like the 10-minute and 30-second mark. We're seeing Flash having to move out even later than that. Yeah, look at this harass. This is brutal. But if Zero stopped right now, he would still be in a beautiful position. That is the key thing to note. What a wonderful game by Zero. I love this. Look, still making drones. What a hero, man. Look at that. That is absolutely essential to understanding what Zero's doing, right? He's using these Mutalisks to do a bunch of damage, and these Lurkers are either going to be doing this tactic here, but if they can't, they'll probably be positioned up here at this high ground pod and down here, and drones will still be in production. Look, nothing but drones have been made for Zero for quite some time. And then he's going to get 7 hatcheries, 1 at each of these bases, and then 4 at this mineral natural. So Zero's happily just killing stuff off, and then he's just going to back off. He's not going to obsessively commit, you know, to keeping his lurkers there as you know, an inexperienced player might. And we see the hive coming down, very early +1 carapace. Always good to get that +1 carapace out of the way, because that always proves instrumental for, you know, dealing with the Terran mid-game push. That's actually a pretty important concept. If you can delay the Terran's mid-game push enough with your Mutalisks to let your Lurkerling employ that +1 carapace upgrade. And still killing it. And notice what Zero's doing. He's just killing off the SCVs in these 2 patches. In particular, any SCVs that wander right there. Very, you know, not aggressive Mutalisks. They're taking opportunities that are presented, but they're not trying to force opportunities to happen. Really just focusing on keeping those Mutalisks alive. And then look, now, you know, we have this big-ass army coming out for Zero. And he's just going to get himself in a good position. And this is always a very difficult spot to be in. This is a very common technique to do in this matchup. When the Terran has 2 ways to push, here's the first one, going up and then down, or going through this shorter, thinner, narrower choke right there. You position your units, like you position your Lurkerling at one of the 2 locations, either up here or down here. And whichever way the Terran goes, if he goes the way your units are, you defend. If he goes the other way, you counterattack. Very common thing to do. It was extremely typical on Peaks of Baekdu, when Terran pretty much had to go through the left lane or the right lane, and Zergs would just keep their units always in the right lane and counterattack if the Terran didn't attack also in the right lane. Pulling the Mutalisk out, and here's a pretty key thing. Now this is not exclusive to this build, what Zero's doing right here. What Zero's doing is he's just going to use his whoopsie daisies. Yeah, don't throw your Mutalisks into stuff. Oh yeah, and see, using 2 lurkers just to block stuff off a little bit. Flash being very proactive about making sure he doesn't get caught off guard anywhere. But Muta-Lurker forces tanks to siege. If you just have lurkers, the tanks don't have to siege and can push very aggressively. So if you open 3-hatch Lurkerling and go for a big army and your hive's a little delayed and you're really worried about getting those defilers in time, this is the technique you use. You burrow the lurkers and you use your Mutalisks to force these tanks to siege. Unfortunately, Zero's just continuing to stockpile stuff. Look at this incredible patience. Way too many Zergs say, oh, you know, I've already won, and they attack at like the 12-minute mark or something, but Zero patiently waited for all these hatcheries to kick in, and look how many units he has now. Now we're at the 13-22 second mark, so let's back up just a little bit to when this push was just about to begin. See, we're just at the 12-minute and 30-second mark. And just now Flash is beginning to push out, and notice that this this red glob, sorry, I'm yellow-red colorblind, this red blob is not quite big. That's not so many units, right? We have some Hydras that are not lurkers yet. We have 4 extra lurkers, but like no lings. And lings are kind of what allow us to push forward. We just have these mutas and lurkers continuing to do stuff. All the larvae have either been making gas units, namely mutas or lurkers, or drones. And now that we're starting to delay the push, that's when we start to build Zerglings. You're going to see more and more red slowly stream up here. It's kind of faint. And I imagine it's even harder to see given the live stream quality. But, not to say the live stream quality is bad. I actually enjoy live stream quite a bit. It's just it's sort of a minute little brief red blip that's, you know, traveling in half an inch across the minimap. Yeah, so look now, really letting that red build up. You know, getting those lurkers up there in the front. Those 4 lurkers are now burrowing up there, trying to make an ever-increasingly large wall. But now we're attacking, and look how many more units are there. So, first of all, here's at least 24 Zerglings right here. And look how many more Zerglings are coming. Just 45 seconds ago, there were about 8 Zerglings. But look at how many Zerglings are there now. Holy shit. That was awesome. That was completely overpoweringly good. And that attack, this attack is another way of saying I had a great economic follow-through to my opening game plan. And of course, with Zero being able to be aggressive and move up this path, this expansion becomes very safe. If, you know, Zero was having to play defensively and was back here, this expansion might be a little bit more safe. But the aggression, the opportunity to take this high ground pod makes that north expansion the ideal location to take a 5th base. More Zerglings just streaming out of those 4 hatches at this Mineral Natural and everywhere else. That is what is so fun about building up an economy, is having like 8 control groups of Zerglings when the Terran's first push comes out. And it's just like, oh god, how do you stop it? Still, Zero not overcommitting, inching his way forward, restricting this expansion. Not running up here and desperately trying to kill off all these Medic Marine, just restricting this expansion. Now expanding to the bottom location because, you know, why not? You're in a huge lead, just keep expanding. And by the way, that's a pretty significant thing to note. If you're ever in an unbelievable lead, just keep expanding, you know. It's very common for players to get in this habit of, you know, I'm going to take my 3rd now, I'm going to take my 4th this time, I'm going to take my 5th this time. And then what happens is, right after they take their 3rd, they kill off a ton of, you know, the enemy units and are at this big advantage, but they'll still take their 4th at the time they said and their 5th at the time they said. Just, you know, expand, no big deal. I mean, look at this. Zero's able to take this north expansion and this bottom expansion. You know, and that's going to be even harder for Terran to deal with because Terran's going to be fairly immobile, especially given his situation. And see the Zerg still continuing to build up. See, he's spreading out here. He's getting his stuff in a very good position. This is a real common technique we're seeing more and more. Not recently, but a lot of players... let me rephrase that. Probably 6 months ago, players really started to leave Zerglings at their expansions instead of just having Scourge to hit the dropships because Terrans were so good about forcing dropships in. And obviously Zero has the units to do it. Now watch the way this attack operated, right? All the units from the back have started to move first. This is actually a great example of big army control. It's actually back up. Here's a whole bunch of key units in the front. We have a bunch of Defilers and Lurkers. Actually, no Defilers there yet. Just a bunch of Lurkers sitting there in position, hanging out, not doing anything. Just restricting the movement. And then we have a little bit more movement with the Zerglings here. And you're going to see all the units at the back move first. And then we're going to see these things unburrow. So here the units are slowly starting to get ready to go. So they're getting in position. And then look, all the units in the back start moving. And then, so here now the units in the middle are moving. And then, wait for it, and now everything's moving all at once, right? Now the front and the back and the middle units are burrowing. And he's moving in from 2 sides with this giant force. You know, Zero had a huge-ass army a while ago, but he still waited for Defilers. A lot of patience going on here. That's what's really fun about these economic games, is that if you have patience with your attacks and time them very nicely, they end up being attacks that are like 5 times as large as players are used to, and then you end up getting the good game, right? You end up putting the hurt on your opponent. So since that was a fairly short game, we've only been doing this for about 28 minutes. I'll happily take 10-15 minutes of questions here. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great example of Flash doing the a very normal response to that sort of ultra-fast Mutalisk, you know, taking some damage from it. But Zero's super economic follow-through allows him to have this incredible mid-game, which was really, really amazing. So, Jugan says, Flash scouted the layer tech and saw the early Spire going down. Did Flash simply get greedy by choosing not to throw up early turrets? If not, what happened? Flash may have gotten his turret timing thrown off just a little bit, but this really is what I think was happening, is that Flash was preparing himself for a 2-hatch all-in Mutalisks. So, you know, if you lose, you know, if you spend that money getting upgrades, the extra barracks, a few extra units and workers, and then sack 1 or 2 units and an SCV, for those late turrets. It's not a big deal because you're going to throw up a bunch of turrets. And Flash's mind, Flash is thinking, yeah, I can hold off 2-hatch ultra-fast Mutalisks, no problem. I think I'll be in great shape. It's the follow-through that really did it. Because actually, let's go back and look at that. Because the early harass didn't do, like, monumental damage, right? It did, the damage it was supposed to do. So you've seen 4 Marines die. Actually, I think that's the 4th. This turret got canceled. There's a 5th Marine. 6th Marine. 7th. Lost an SCV. That's actually the 2nd SCV that's gone down. And we're trying to get a few more SCVs. But you know what? If you're against a 2-hatch Mutalisking player, this is pretty typical. This is pretty typical losses. And now, from Flash's point of view, that's all I dealt with. I dealt with about 20 seconds of getting hit on, right here, and now I've done it. Now I've held off the harassment. I'm in good shape to win. I'm positioning turrets in key locations. So, as a result, I'm feeling like I've actually won the game right now as Flash. I'm thinking, I took those hits, and, I don't want to lose workers, but I'll gladly lose, a few Marines, and then I'll win the game in 5 minutes or so. Here's a great question. Dewey says, is this a map-specific strategy, i.e. good for mutamaps like Matchpoint, or is this early muta strategy something that can be used reliably on a consistent basis? I think it's a pretty reliable thing to do. I mean, obviously it helps that Matchpoint has this cute structure behind the natural expansion, so the Mutalisks can do quite a bit of damage there. But, I mean, if you think about it, if you're getting ultra-fast Mutalisks, Terran's in kind of an uncomfortable position because he has he has Marines without stim. Ugh, that's kind of an icky spot to be in. But because you have this economic follow-through, as long as you have a good plan for how you're going to continue to expand, then yeah, I think you're in good shape. One thing to note, though, what was very nice is that Zero is at the opposite side of the map. So that means that Zero is able to slowly micro back and hold off that push that will inevitably come. So for instance, right around here when this group came out, notice that it's at 8 minutes and 18 seconds. So here, there's micro coming, right? There's micro, more micro, hitting it from this angle, actually really, just this little high ground thing's a real pain in the butt to deal with an army moving forward. But, this fight to get up here onto the Zerg's high ground, and then this fight to get in there, this is a pretty long distance for the units to have to travel. So I think that's a pretty significant thing to know. Obviously, don't do it if you're in super ultra-close positions. Or you can go ultra-fast Mutalisks if you're in super ultra-close positions and just kill them with the 2-hatch Mutalisk. So Zerg Need Food says, how did Terran react to Zerg's extremely early Mutalisks? What kind of mentality should you have when the Mutalisks are in your base and wreaking havoc? I think that you should say, this is fine, right? Because Mutalisks are in there, they're doing damage, but the Zerg sacrificed economy to get in the position that he is in. Anytime there is some ultra super basically mega attack, right? God, that's such a dumb word. It's a mega attack, guys. Anytime he does some sort of like big commitment attack, like let's pretend it's just ordinary ultra fast 2-hatch Mutalisks. That Zerg is not getting a third base anytime soon. He's not even getting a third hatch anytime soon. He really needs to do damage to be even. Not to win, but to be even. The Zerg player needs to do tons of damage. So your goal shouldn't be, I need to have no damage happen. It should be to minimize the damage and to, at the end, still come out ahead. So your mentality should be, I am going to lose some stuff, and that's normal. I want to make sure that I can eventually force this to stop. Notice how quickly Flash was able to force it to stop. Certainly if it was an all-in 2-hatch Mutalisk, Zero would have been doing a lot more Mutalisk action for a little bit longer, but still, I think it was a pretty good situation that Flash set himself up in. So Not Jack says, a lot of strategies based on early harass to allow heavy econ builds don't work on maps or start points with closer proximities. Do you think this is the case here? Oh, sorry, I read that question out loud before I read it, but yeah, exactly what I was saying previously about, this is what allows this sort of harassment into expand thing to work nicely, is that the Mutalisks can abuse the long-ish attack distance with those I don't know where the end of my sentence went. I'm sure it'll come back eventually. But yeah, that long distance is helpful. Oh yeah, by the way, I have a Facebook page. So you guys should all become friends of Day 9. I don't manage the page. Just 2 of my wonderful Icelandic friends did support for me there. So yeah, you should totally sign up for it. And that way I can get a bazillion trillion fans on Facebook. Yeah, totally awesome. So A says, I just played a game on Matchpoint with a friend, and I built an exorbitant amount of turrets in order to cope with his... Oops. I actually muted chat before he had the second half of his question, so I will unmute chat. I will just talk a little bit about building a ton of turrets. Again, you shouldn't build a bazillion turrets, but you do need a pretty substantial amount. If your opponent's doing some sort of super duper aggressive all-in. You know, I think Flash versus Calm, the game I did yesterday, is a great example of how many turrets you can get away with building and still get total mid-game dominance. So, I would say you can get away with like 5 turrets in your natural and 5 turrets in your main pretty comfortably, as long as you're very good at forcing your way into the center and abusing that sort of situation. So I'm still going to be taking about 5 minutes more of questions. So I'm going to let a little bit of the chat come out, and then I will go ahead and mute it, so that way we don't have this huge Matrix-type stream of information. So Inhale says, that strat was based around Mutalisks. If Zero had lost them, what could be his backup plan? You know, I think his plan was just not to lose them. I know that's kind of a dumb thing to say, but if you think about it, Zero doesn't really need a huge backup plan because he's getting Mutalisks no matter what before his opponent has Stim. Or if his opponent did, by some miracle, get Stim quickly enough, he has to have fewer Marines. So, you know, he's in good shape to do some damage. And I also want to point out the fact that we're going to note here that the Mutalisks get here at about 5 minutes and 40 seconds, and we're only going to see, it's like 40 seconds of being in Flash's face. That's it. So here's the harass going on. He pretty much backs off in a little bit here, right? He's at 6 minutes here. 6 minutes and 16 seconds, and yeah, there we go. Yeah, no problem. So it's a reasonable question to say, what do you do if you lose your Mutalisks? And the answer is, put yourself in a position where that doesn't really have to happen. So right now, think of the brilliance that Zero just did. He abused this early timing to do some damage with the intention of never advancing in there after that point. So Flash, who's now desperately building 4, 5, 6 more turrets, Flash is building those turrets for nothing because Zero is planning to never, ever, ever attack them. Oh god, this play is just so brilliant. So yeah, it's okay to plan not to screw up. You should assume that you can play things perfectly. Because, you know, man, believe in yourself, trust in yourself. That's the way that is the path to the A+. So Angry Hippo says, could Flash have played more defensively and taken 3 expos and tried to catch up economically instead of pushing out so early? That's a tough question. That is a really tough question. I will ponder it with green tea. Nifty. So, let's see here. I mean, it's hard to say because I think that Flash is in a position where he's against a build. It's just so unusual. But really, I think there should always be some mid-game timing push with the science vessels. What Flash might have ended up doing is just not moving out after the initial harass. And of course he's been doing that so frequently that, you know, certainly he's comfortable with it. But after that first big push, like this is the one that I'm referring to, let's just go onto the main screen. With this first Medic Marine group moving out, this group that, you know, continued to reinforce and move across, because after Flash lost this group right here, he was pretty far behind. Now, ordinarily, Flash has this kind of group when the Zerg is at 2 bases with his 3rd almost finished. But in this circumstance, the Zerg has 4 bases completely finished, you know. It's a little bit later than he normally would, so I think that was potentially the issue there. So, again, I think he should push out early and take his 3rd, you know, relatively normal timed, but I think that maybe avoiding that early push out after he's kind of had a little bit too much pressure put on him. Flash may have just been a little bit thrown off by that opening. So let's see here. Here's a reasonable question. How do you pronounce that? Xeracos. It's Xaracos. Says, hey Day9, I've noticed a lot of Zergs are doing pool first versus Terrans these days. Do you think they are behind in economy, or is it worth it to stop a proxy barrack? So there's two things I have to say about that. One is that a lot of Zerg players are doing it on maps where there's a big risk of an SCV blocking the first hatch. So for instance, on Match Point, 2-player map, that's a big concern to happen. The Terran player just sends an SCV and just really gets in your face. You build the early pool to put a little bit of pressure back on the Terran and sort of deal with that. The second thing to note is that you can use the early pool to send Zerglings to the Terran to screw him up just a little bit, because you're slightly behind on economy if you get the early pool, and you can force your Terran opponent to be slightly behind on economy by, forcing him to build his command center in his main and then lift and float, instead of being able to build it right there at his expansion. You can force him to get 2 or 3 Marines before he makes his command center, where a lot of players get 1 or 0 Marines before then. So yeah, I'm just going to take 2 more questions. I'm going to go ahead and mute the chat and hold off on the questions for now, because I already had the questions selected out. JLab2 says, I've been doing the flash build in Terran vs. Zerg, and I can't seem to push back the Mutalisks. And also, a lot of Zergs are getting Guardians lately. If I see this, how should I react? It's hard to do this early push out with the Medic Marine. You just have to be careful with it and be sure to have that timing really exact. Definitely go back in your replays and making sure it's coming out right at 5 minutes 20 seconds is about the time you should be getting ready to move out. You actually, I think, move out a little bit before your stim even finishes. And also making sure that you're scouting to make sure that your opponent hasn't made a bunch of Zerglings to kill you off or something like that. So that is pretty key. I'm hoping that when you say push back the Mutalisks, you're referring to the initial Medic Marine group. But probably the most important thing is just to have a good follow-through with getting the 3rd barracks up and the factory and teching very quickly. You can add on a few more barracks than you think you can after you've lost that initial Medic Marine group. And as long as you've kept those Mutalisks really far back, you should be super aggressive with those Medic Marine. And also when you move out, send an SCV to where you think his expansion is. That way you can sort of get a better take on where your decisions should be made. So we should be taking 1 more questions. Lee and Ho says, Day 9. Sorry. JLab forgot to say stuff about the Guardians. With the Guardians, you should stop making vessels for just a brief period of time to get some Wraiths, assuming it's getting very fast Guardians, but then transition right back into your normal plan. Don't overcommit to Wraiths. Don't get like 20 Wraiths. You don't really need that many. You just need enough to be able to shoot the Guardians and sort of whittle them down. Don't be afraid to lift up your command center and have it not mining for 45 seconds while you deal with it. And, for God's sake, continue to push into the middle, because mid-game control is so huge. So yeah, that would be my answer to that. So Leonho says, Day 9, I have a question. In Terran vs. Zerg, I've been utilizing the 9-minute push in order to threaten the Zerg's natural or his 3rd, while simultaneously dropping. And and I also cut off the second half of his question. So Leonho, if you'd be kind enough to post the second half of your question. I keep sort of muting and unmuting chat. Because I don't want to have too much streaming up. But, occasionally every now and again I mute someone when they're halfway through their question. So I'll take 1 more in the meantime. So Good Luck says, how do you think the game would have changed if Flash did a higher vessel count or played a 2-factory game? I don't think it would have been a big difference at all. I mean, really, Zero is in an incredibly advantageous situation going right into the mid-game. So, nothing really too much he could do about that. I mean, if you go 2-factory, yeah, you get a whole bunch of tanks, but then your vessels are delayed and your push is delayed even more. I mean, Flash's push came out at like 12 minutes. Ugh, that was kind of a really late push, but, understandable given the circumstances. And also, Flash is tending to delay that first big push and opt for some little micro push with Marines first. The second half of Leonho's questions. Leonho says, Day 9, I have a question. Terran vs. Zerg, I've been utilizing the 9-minute push in order to threaten the Zerg's natural and his 3rd, while simultaneously dropping. But he does a late hive with a heavy Mutalisk attack, and I cannot seem to stop his harass on maps such as Fighting Spirit. What's really important to note is that it is okay to delay the push a little bit. The goal of the 3rd push is to maintain control of the center. Assuming your Zerg player is competent, he's going to have some way to not die to your 3rd push. But most Zergs really won't have a way to prevent you from getting into the center. So that should be your primary goal. with that. And if he's doing a lot of Mutalisk harass, his tech and everything he's doing is delayed because he's spending so much money on the aggressive harass. So comfortably build more turrets, make sure you're safe, and then progress with your initial plan. And then you'll end up moving out in maybe 10 minutes or 10 minutes and 30 seconds, but no big deal. You're still in an equivalent situation. With no harass, you move out at 9 minutes and 30 seconds, and you do a reasonable amount of damage. If you're spending money on a ton of harass, you spend a bunch of money on defense, you move out at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and you still do, a pretty decent amount of damage. So that will wrap up Day 9 Daily number 41. The CSL casts from yesterday are up on the on-demand. You can see them in the Day 9 Daily thread, or you can see them right there. It should be like below the video. I'll be doing the Team Liquid Star League cast with Chill on Sunday, so all of you should tune into that. It will be at 1400 Eastern Time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, and sometime in South Korea. I don't really know what time it will be, but it will definitely be. You can watch it from South Korea, and as well as Europe. So I really like the timing that Team Liquid set up for that. So everyone should tune into that. So yeah, that's going to be it. So continue to play StarCraft and never give up. Keep thinking of ways to play more like Zero and to have these little slight adjustments on your build that result in these wildly kick-ass late games. So thanks a bunch, everybody. Cheers!